Dave Cave lived in the city of Escondido with his fiancée, Carrie, and her 14-year-old daughter, Amber Dubois. The teenage girl was at the age that is commonly called transitional. In Dave's eyes, Amber was quite the rebel. The girl did not recognize any rules, violated all boundaries of what was allowed, and constantly argued with her stepfather. Dave was never an authority figure for her. He was a stranger who had invaded their world with her mother and was trying to dictate his own terms. Among her friends, Amber was an ordinary high school student. She loved meeting with her girlfriends and read a lot. The girl was not a spoiled teenager. She studied well in school and had not even started using makeup yet. The thing was that her parents' divorce had been hard on her, and the appearance of another man in her mother's life meant that everything would now change. The man who had taken on the role of stepfather never overstepped the mark in raising his stepdaughter. He simply asked her to help her mother, at least somehow, and to listen to his opinion. But even these minimal requirements infuriated Amber. It got to the point where the girl simply began to ignore her stepfather. The confrontation lasted more than a month. As soon as Dave opened his mouth, the schoolgirl would demonstratively plug her ears and leave the room. But one day in February, something clicked. Amber suddenly sat down next to Dave herself and suggested they talk. That evening, the stepfather and stepdaughter expressed to each other the accumulated grievances and dissatisfactions. As a result, they decided to start everything from a clean slate. As a gesture of reconciliation, Dave even invited Amber to take a walk at the shopping mall. The man and his stepdaughter bought a bunch of clothes, books, and even a couple of cute trinkets. They returned home pleased and happy. For the first time in a long time, Dave and Amber felt like a real family. By the end of the quarter at school, Amber had a class project called Future Farmers of America. The city of Escondido was located in a valley and was hidden from the outside world by the surrounding hills. Originally, the settlement had been formed as an agricultural center. It was common for the city's residents to have domestic animals. Children from school age were also taught to engage in raising livestock. Amber had always dreamed of a pet, and as part of the school course, students were offered to take care of lambs. All they had to do was bring a check to school, and then the children could take home the animal they liked. Grades were given for how the children cared for the pet, how they brushed it, fed it, and monitored its health. But the most important thing was that the lamb would stay with them forever. Upon learning this joyful news, Amber hurried home. She enthusiastically told her parents about the school project and looked at them pleadingly. And they did not have to be persuaded for long. The man wanted to strengthen the fragile relationship between him and his stepdaughter that had only recently begun to form. He easily agreed to cover the expenses. He said he would write a check so that Amber could have her own lamb. The girl smiled happily and even hugged her stepfather. She really appreciated his care. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more cases. This helps us a lot. Thank you. Early in the morning, on February 13th, she came to Dave for the money. Her stepfather wrote her a check and left for the gym. When he returned, Amber was already not at home. Usually, when classes ended, Amber went straight home. The school was just a couple of steps away, and the student did not need to adjust to the school bus. But today, Amber was delayed for some reason. At first, the parents were not worried. The girl could have chatted with her friends or been running around with her lamb, losing track of time. Later, Dave still called the school just to find out if Amber's classes had ended, and here he was stunned. The thing was that the girl had not appeared in class at all. Of course, Amber was a teenager with character, but not to the point of skipping school without any reason. At home, she could be capricious, but she had always been responsible about her studies. Especially today, they were supposed to bring the lambs. The parents immediately realized that something was wrong and hurried to the police. Fortunately, the police officers did not brush them off and immediately accepted the report. They immediately began large-scale searches. The officers went around the neighbors, talked with the missing schoolgirl's friends, and requested phone call records from the operator. Carrie and Dave also did not sit idle. They drove along Amber's route to school, put up flyers around the city, and went around all the houses in the area. In the following days, more than 400 volunteers searched on foot an area of 500 square kilometers. Then, the police came across something really suspicious. Amber had a flip phone. All this time, while she was being searched for, the mobile phone had been turned off. But at some point, the phone turned on for just a few seconds. Someone checked the voicemail and immediately turned it off again. The question arose, who was it? Amber, who was hiding and had deliberately turned off the phone so she would not be found? Or had someone kidnapped the girl and was now monitoring the schoolgirl's calls? The police were completely at a loss. One thing was clear. The girl had not simply gone for a walk. It was either a runaway from home or a real crime. First of all, the police officers decided to work on the worst-case scenario. Could someone have really harmed Amber? And most importantly, for what purpose? It was at this point that the police officers' attention fell on Amber's stepfather, Dave. According to witnesses, the man had been acting strangely. In the morning, Dave had left the house very early to work out at the gym. This was normal, as he often did workouts before work. But that day, instead of going to the office from the gym, Dave drove home. The man explained that he had deliberately taken the day off, supposedly to work on tax returns. But before, Dave had never in his life brought paperwork home. He had done it for the first time on the very day his stepdaughter disappeared. And that was strange. There was one more but. During the day, Dave visited Carrie, Amber's mom, at work. He bought flowers and chocolate-covered strawberries. The man wanted to make a surprise for Valentine's Day. However, the calendar showed February 13th. Dave, who could not stand holidays and usually pretended that Valentine's Day did not exist at all, suddenly started playing the romantic. To say that Carrie was surprised would be an understatement. She was simply shocked by the unexpected surprise. None of this matched the image of her partner. Even stranger was the fact that afterward, Dave sat down at her desk and chatted about all sorts of nonsense. Carrie repeatedly hinted to him that it was time for her to get back to work, but the man seemed not to hear. 45 minutes passed before she pushed him out the door. Now a bunch of questions arose. Why had Dave Cave suddenly become romantic and caring? Did the man need to confirm his alibi? Was he watching Carrie's reaction? Was he somehow involved in the disappearance of his 14-year-old stepdaughter? The teachers at the school where Amber studied noticed that day that the girl was not in class. They decided that she was sick and called home to inquire about her well-being. At that moment, no one answered the phone. By that time, Dave had already returned from the gym. According to him, he had been home alone. Then why had no one answered the call from the school? After learning about all these details, the police asked Dave directly where he had been that day and why he had not answered the call if he was at home. The man just shrugged. He could not explain why he had not heard the phone. Despite the fact that the story turned out to be confusing and raised a lot of suspicions, there was not a single concrete piece of evidence. For lack of evidence, the police could not arrest Amber's stepfather, but everyone around, including the mother of the missing schoolgirl, began to doubt his honesty. Carrie could no longer lie in the same bed with a man who was suspected of a crime, and not just of breaking the law, but of kidnapping her only daughter. Dave categorically denied any involvement in Amber's disappearance, but Carrie could not get rid of her doubts. 6 weeks after Amber disappeared, the woman broke up with Dave and moved out of his house. She did not believe that Dave could have planned the crime in advance, but she allowed for the possibility that her teenage daughter could have somehow provoked the man with her behavior. And living with a person you suspect is simply impossible. Dave passed a lie detector test 8 times. The polygraph results indicated that he was not lying. Nevertheless, in the following months, every step Dave took was accompanied by close public scrutiny. The problem was that no one knew for sure what had happened to 14-year-old Amber Dubois. No one knew the truth. If Dave was really guilty, it meant he had fooled everyone and gotten away with it. And if he was innocent, then his life had been shattered to pieces, and all because of one strange day and one unanswered phone call. 6 months after Amber's disappearance, in August 2009, the schoolgirl's family hired a canine team to search for a person by scent. The dogs led the specialists to a highway in a remote area near an Indian village. Further, the trail was lost. The animals ran near the road, sniffing the air. But the body was never found. Carrie did not lose hope that her daughter was still alive. Almost a year passed, and the Amber Dubois case was still unsolved. And then another girl disappeared. On February 25, 2010, the police were informed that 17-year-old Chelsea King had gone for a run and had not returned. Her car was found not far from a local hiking trail in a public park in San Diego, California. The schoolgirl had last been seen near the lake. The lake was only 16 kilometers from Amber's house. It was just a few minutes by car. Chelsea King, like Amber, attended high school. An ordinary girl, she was a member of the Youth Symphony Orchestra. Her report card was all A's. A diligent student, she planned to go to college in the future, but fate decided otherwise. Amber Dubois' family, along with hundreds of volunteers, joined the search for Chelsea. They printed flyers and posted them around the city. Just as a year earlier, Carrie had searched for her own daughter. The woman still believed to the last that Amber would return home alive and unharmed. In the meantime, Carrie wanted to help search for another schoolgirl. At first, the police did not connect the two cases. The girls were not relatives, did not know each other, and had never even communicated. There was a high probability that they did not know of each other's existence at all. However, local residents became alarmed. In their quiet, peaceful area, something unusual rarely happened. But suddenly, in 1 year, 2 missing teenagers. It was too much of a coincidence. This circumstance caused many to suspect that both girls had become victims of the same criminal. The police also began to think about it. And when they began searching for Chelsea King, they also checked whether there would be a connection to Amber's case. One day, a search team was combing the grass along the path where Chelsea usually ran. And very close to the trail, they discovered a sock and women's underwear. The items were shown to Chelsea's parents. Her mother confirmed that these were Chelsea's things. Analysis of the DNA particles found on the underwear showed a match. The DNA belonged to a man listed in the National Registry of Persons who had committed sex crimes. The man's name was John Gardner. At the time of Chelsea King's disappearance in 2010, he was 31 years old. John Gardner was born in 1979. He grew up in California. From childhood, it was clear that something was wrong with the boy. He was not a bad child. He was simply different from most. His father regularly punished little John, yelled at him, put him in the corner, and periodically reached for the belt. Then his parents divorced. The boy's further upbringing was handled by his stepfather. Unlike his biological father, the man did not offend his stepson, but the good attitude of his sister and parents had no effect on the child's behavior at school. In class, John could not sit still for long. When the teacher was explaining a new topic, he could easily stand up in the middle of the lesson and start shouting something. He always wanted to be the center of attention. At his desk, John fidgeted and interfered with everyone else. The teachers were puzzled. The guy was clearly not stupid, but he did not want to study and did not let others do so. At the insistence of the teachers, the parents took John to a doctor to assess his learning abilities. That doctor sent him to another specialist, then to a third. The doctors threw up their hands. The diagnoses changed like gloves. The medications either did not help or only made things worse. In general, medicine was unable to identify the problem and prescribe the correct treatment. By high school, John's behavior had changed even more for the worse, and after graduation, Gardner's life completely went downhill. He did not go to college, but he got a college girlfriend. Every day, waiting for her after classes, John would hang around the campus for hours. Although the rules prohibited outsiders from being on college grounds, Gardner was not particularly interested in that. He never followed other people's rules and did whatever came into his head. One day, the girl got tired of receiving remarks from the teachers, and she dumped the clingy boyfriend. He continued to walk around, wait for her near the dormitory, and annoy everyone around with his presence. The school administration had to call the police, and as a result, John was arrested for the first time. In 2000, when John was 20 years old, he invited his neighbor Kelly over. The guy suggested they watch a movie together. He warned her that he liked her, but only as a friend. Kelly was a 13-year-old teenager. She did not doubt the young man's words. John lived next door and caused no concern at all, but as soon as they were alone, the guy seemed to snap. He attacked Kelly and tried to undress her. The girl was seriously frightened. Compared to her, John looked like a big, strong man whom it was not so easy to handle. The only thing she could do was try to run away. But Gardner, heated with desire, did not want to let go of his prey. The girl's screams finally drove him out of his mind. John grabbed her by the blouse, blocked her path, and began to beat her. It is unknown how it all could have ended, but at some point, John seemed to come to his senses. He stopped swinging his fists, apologized, and let Kelly go home. These sharp changes in Gardner frightened the girl even more. It was as if two different people were in one body. All in tears and bruises, Kelly rushed home. She told her parents what had happened to her. The girl's father immediately called the police, and soon the investigation began. During interrogation, John Gardner stubbornly insisted on his innocence. He stated that Kelly was too young for him. They had simply watched a movie, and the girl had gone home. He had no idea where the bruises on her body had come from. Of course, to everyone the story sounded fake. To everyone except John. He so sincerely believed in his stories, as if he really did not remember beating Kelly. However, the evidence against the guy was indisputable. Gardner was charged with molesting a minor. He made a deal with the prosecution and still admitted his guilt. For this, his sentence was reduced. Instead of the presumed 11 years in prison, he was sentenced to only 6. Previously, the young man had no criminal record, and the court took this into account as a mitigating circumstance. As a result, John spent 5 years behind bars. He was released in 2006 on parole. For Gardner, the prisoner rehabilitation program was nothing more than a way to get out of prison. Psychologists working with convicted criminals realized that John was not going to change and was simply looking for a way to break free. Despite this, the guy was released from prison a year early. When in 2006 Gardner finally left the prison walls, he continued to break the law. They had given him a chance, and he simply trampled on it. John was placed under house arrest. He was supposed to stay at home and wear an electronic ankle bracelet, but the man learned how to disable the device and freely walk the streets. He bought weapons and prohibited drugs, wandered near children's institutions, which was strictly forbidden to him, and even settled near a school. The wildest thing was that those who were supposed to monitor him pretended not to notice anything. Probation officers turned a blind eye, and the police did not react. The authorities seemed not to see any real threat to society in him. According to court documents, during the time he wore the bracelet, he committed a total of 168 violations of the conditions of his early release. Now that Gardner's DNA had been found on the belongings of the missing Chelsea King, the investigators reviewed the court documents. They saw that the man had previously attacked schoolgirls, beaten them, stalked them, and tried to force them into intimacy. If John really had something to do with the disappearance of the high school student, then was it not because of him that the other schoolgirl, Amber Dubois, had gone missing? Both girls had disappeared in the same area under unclear circumstances. The detectives decided to check everything again. They reopened old cases, reread all the statements and complaints that had come from this area over the past few years, since the time John had been released from prison. That was how the detectives came across 22-year-old Candice Moncayo. On December 27, 2009, 2 months before 14-year-old Amber disappeared, Candice had filed a report with the police. One morning, the girl had gone for her usual run, covered 13 kilometers, got tired, and decided to relax a bit. It was at that moment that an unknown man approached her. Candice did not understand at all what he wanted. The girl greeted him out of politeness, but instead of greeting her back, he attacked her, knocked her to the ground, and began to pull up her shirt. The stranger's touches made the athlete remember everything her father had taught her. Candice's father was a well-known professional kickboxer. From a young age, he had trained his daughter in self-defense techniques and explained how to act in case of an attack. As it turned out, the effects of the training had not been in vain. Of course, Candice was scared when she found herself in the arms of a maniac, but the girl did not panic. She managed to swing and punch the attacker right in the nose. While he was wiping the bloody snot, she rushed straight to the police station for help. Unfortunately, the man was not found at the time. The description was too vague. Candice had no time to examine the attacker's face. She needed to get away as quickly as possible. But now, the detectives had a specific man, John Gardner. They invited Candace to the police station and showed her a photograph. She confirmed that it was him. In the girl's head at that hour was that terrible episode. There could be no mistake. It was Gardner whose nose she had broken when he tried to take her. Later, the investigators discovered another find. They searched the area where Gardner had attacked Candace and came across the remains of 17-year-old Chelsea King. It is unlikely her body would have been found so quickly if nature and wild animals had not helped. The girl's corpse lay in a shallow pit, covered with leaves, branches, and earth. Chelsea King had been killed. The evidence indicated that John Gardner was the perpetrator. It was him whom the high school student had met on her run, and that meeting turned out to be fatal. Later, Gardner confessed in court that he had attacked her and dragged her to a secluded place. First, he raped her, and then he strangled her. He buried the girl in a shallow grave on the shore of the lake. By that time, Amber Dubois' fate still remained a mystery to the police. Her body had not been found. It was unclear whether anything had happened to her at all, or whether the teenage girl had simply run away from home. Only Gardner himself could answer these questions. The detectives decided to use a trick. California. Law provided for the death penalty for the crimes committed by John. He was offered a choice: cooperation with the authorities and life imprisonment, or the death penalty for the murder of Chelsea King and the attack on Candace Moncayo. All he had to do was confess to the kidnapping of Amber and show where her remains were. If the girl was no longer alive, it was important for the authorities to return her body to her parents. The grief-stricken mother and father needed at least to say goodbye to their daughter and bury her properly. The criminal thought it over, weighed the risks, and agreed. The man confessed that Amber's body had been buried in a remote area near the district where an Indian tribe lived. The police went to the indicated site and organized a search. Soon, human bones were indeed discovered. By that time, almost nothing remained of the body. Even some parts of the skeleton were missing. Apparently, wild animals had reached the remains and dragged them around the area. Dental examination confirmed Gardner's words. Everything matched. It was 14-year-old Amber Dubois. On Friday, February 13, 2009, Gardner was driving down the street in his car. That day, he had no specific plans. His mood was terrible. His personal life was not working out at all. Every day lived was like the previous one. Out of boredom, the man was turning his head from side to side and suddenly saw Amber. The girl was literally glowing with happiness. Amber was already imagining how she would bring home a little lamb that evening. Amber interested John. He carefully looked around. There were residential houses nearby. If the teenager had screamed, someone would surely have heard. To avoid unnecessary witnesses, the schoolgirl needed to be intimidated. John stopped near the girl, pointed a gun in her face, and ordered her to get into the car immediately. Gardner saw the smile slide off her face and her hands begin to shake. Frightened by the weapon, Amber obediently sat down in the passenger seat. John turned on the radio, deciding that cheerful music would help her calm down. By that time, the criminal had not yet decided what he would do with the girl. He turned around and drove toward the Indian village. Already there, in the remote area, a wild desire came over him. After raping Amber, Gardner pulled out a knife and inflicted several fatal stab wounds. Initially, the man had not planned to attack her, much less kill her. He wanted to let the schoolgirl go, hoping she would not tell her parents. But at some point, he suddenly wanted to pull out the knife and watch Amber's eyes go out forever. When Gardner confessed, it became clear to everyone that Amber's stepfather Dave had absolutely nothing to do with his stepdaughter's disappearance. His strange behavior that day could not be explained. The man had indeed broken his usual daily routine and had not gone to work. He had shown up at Carrie's with gifts on the eve of Valentine's Day and had not heard the call from the school, even though he was at home. In reality, the man had also been inspired by the reconciliation with his stepdaughter. That was exactly why he had behaved a little strangely. He had simply felt happiness in the moment. However, this no longer mattered. Dave was innocent, and all this time he had been telling the truth. As it turned out, the man had done nothing bad to his stepdaughter. He had genuinely wanted to replace her father, but people around him had seen something sinister in it. The relationship with his wife suffered the most. It was painful for Dave to realize that his partner had believed he was capable of harming her daughter. It was also offensive that Carrie had not even apologized. Their life instantly took on a black and white tint on the day Amber disappeared. Surprisingly, despite all this, Dave and Carrie continued to communicate. The relationship was strained, but the man hoped to the last to prove his innocence to the woman he had once loved. And Carrie did not want to lose sight of the man who, in her opinion, knew a little more than everyone else. It was these facts that allowed the former lovers to reach the truth together and learn the truth. Since John Gardner had admitted his guilt, there was no trial under the deal. However, the judge still wanted to give the floor to those whom this tragedy had touched. John was called a monster, a sociopath, a serial maniac, and an animal, but he did not care. Once during the hearing, Gardner cried. However, all this was ordinary pretense. John simply wanted once again to avoid punishment for his crimes. When Candace reminded Gardner of the broken nose, he literally exploded. He did not like that a fragile girl had been able to defeat him in a fight, and now, in front of the public, she had humiliated him. John shouted and tried to prove to the lawyer that Candace had made everything up, that she had not managed to hit him, that he had simply let her go of his own free will. John was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of early release. The man remains behind bars to this day. If you are finished watching, you're a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and give it a like. See you in the next video.